Hello everybody. In this video what I'd like to talk about are pivot tables in Excel. You'll come to see hopefully by the end of this video that pivot tables present a very time-effective means of filtering data. And you can filter data across a wide variety of different constraints and in different ways just by using this inbuilt function in Excel called a pivot table. Okay, so to start with, I'll just describe some of the data which we have here. This data is some streamflow data. It's been downloaded from an Australian government website, and it basically just relates the discharge through a stream, that is the number of megalitres per day that we have coming through a stream, and we have that for a variety of different days. Now, when I said we're talking about large amounts of data here, what I mean is that we have 18,000 odd data points, and so you can imagine that if we wanted to find out some specific pieces of information about this data, that we would not want to use it in its raw form. In other words, we would not want to use all 18,000 data points. We want to produce a summary and to get some extra information out of that. Additionally, so we've got our discharge in this column, and we also have this qualifying column, which basically has recorded not only or it has recorded how the data, what sort of quality the data is in. So you can see most of these points are 2, which is stated to be good quality data, and down at 255, some of the data points have this QC code of 255. They are showing no data recorded for that day. So we're going to show how we can use pivot tables both to filter this data and to filter it according to dates and to filter it according to these QC codes. The first thing that needs to be done with pivot tables is we need to select all of the data range. So I'm just here holding down Shift and Control and hitting the right arrow key and then down to basically just select everything in that range all the way up to row 18,709. Okay, so once we've selected that data, you can hit Pivot Table and Pivot Table up in this Insert menu within Excel. We've already selected our range and we want to produce this in a new worksheet. So everything's okay there, we can just hit OK. And we have a bunch of fields now which we can use to start building up our pivot table. The pivot table is going to go over here on the left, but it's currently more or less blank. Now, one of the first things we want to do, we want to involve the date in our ability to modify this data. We also want to be able to modify this discharge, or to view this discharge value. That's our most critical value that we're looking for. And we want to be able to filter based on this, these QC codes. So our date time column, this is going to be the means of identifying our row in the pivot table. In other words, we are going to arrange these data points as they move down the page in Excel by varying degrees of date. Currently they're on days, the 10th of the 12th, the 11th of the 12th, and we'll see later that we can filter those by months and years as well. As I said, the data that we actually are interested in is this discharge data. Now, with the date time that we wanted to be our row labels, Excel has automatically put that in row labels. Our discharge data, we want to be the value which we're which we're considering in this case. So we can simply click and drag discharge across to values, and you can see now this list has been populated with those values. Except that we want the actual discharge amounts, and we have here instead a count of discharge. So this is one of the ways in which pivot tables can help let you filter data. You're actually able to click this little arrow on this values section, and we can change the kind of output that we're getting. So we could try and find the maximum amount for each day, or the number of data points recorded for each day. In this case, what we want is the sum. As we'll see later, once we start arranging by month and year, we're going to try and sum together over those periods. Okay, now we have the sums for days, and they are arranged by date. We haven't really done much here based on what we started with in the original data, because we already had date relating to discharge for a particular day. But now that we're in the pivot table format, we can do something pretty cool. We can take these, this row sorted in date data, or sorted in daily data, and we can group it by things such as months, for instance. So rather than grouping by days, we're going to instead group by months. And you'll see now that we have the sum of discharges for all of the terms January, all of the terms February, all of the Marches, and so on. But imagine now, instead of wanting to sum over all of these months individually, or all of the months collectively for each year, we wanted to look at the distribution of each month within each year. Well, that's pretty easy to do. We can simply click on both years and months, hit OK, and now we can see a sum of all of the flows in January of 1964, in fact all of the months within 1964, 65, 66 and so on. Okay, great, we've got this pivot table, we can use that to refine our data and we can maybe perform some other sorts of analysis with it. I'm not going to go too much into that analysis just yet, but the last thing that I mentioned at the start of this video, which we also want to do, is we want to perform some amount of filtration. So I mentioned these QC codes. They tell us basically if there's some erroneous data or some OK data, and these are recorded also for the mean flow, minimum flow, or maximum flow in this case. So since it is mean flow that we're interested in for these particular yearly data points, we're also going to look at the QC codes for that mean flow, and we'll put those QC codes in the report filter section. So now we have values, which are our sum of discharge, and our row labels for years and time. We can filter these by looking at the codes across the top here. So we see at the moment, if we drop down this menu, the QC mean has already been put in here. We can drop down this menu and we can see that currently we are selecting all different codes as being valid data outputs. Now if I tick this box to select multiple items, I could simply untick 255. If you remember on the previous page, 255 was our code for no data exists. We basically want to wipe all of those out. And so that's what we've done. We've unticked that 255 box, and you'll see now if we go back to sorting this column simply by days, and we have nothing else in there, we are going to actually have, sorry, not days of the year, we want entirely ungrouped data. There we go, so we can sort that by each days in the year. We have slightly less than the 18,700 or so data points which we started with. In other words, we filtered out some of those null data points. Okay, which is quite good for us. So let's go back to, say, just possibly filtering by years. Another thing that we can use the pivot table to do, we currently have here the sum of all discharges over a year, but what if we wanted to find the maximum flow in a given year, or the minimum flow? We might be asking that sort of information about this particular stream. So again, we can go down to our values section in the pivot table, value field settings, and here we might ask, okay, for each given year, what was the maximum flow? And here we have a table of the maximum daily flow in each year. 1971, we had 404,000 megalitres of water. And similarly, we can do the same thing, value field settings, we set that to minimum, and we're able to find what the lowest flows were in each year. So we had particularly low flows in 1983, minimum flow of 16 megalitres in one day. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to pivot tables. I hope you find this useful. I can imagine there are a number of applications aside from the one presented here for river flow analysis, in which pivot tables can be helpful. Basically, wherever you need to find filtered pieces of information from large sets of data, pivot tables are a handy way to go. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.